It's been nearly 30 years since Anita Hill's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, where she detailed her allegations of sexual harassment at the hands of then Supreme Court Justice nominee Clarence Thomas. Now the legal scholar and activist draws on this experience as she explores the crisis of gender violence in her new book, Believing: Our 30-Year Journey to End Gender Violence. Professor Anita Hill is now with us. And Professor, we thank you so much for your time and joining us tonight. In the book, you describe gender-based violence as an umbrella term that at times lacks nuance. Break down for us how this term should really be reimagined at this point.
Well, the term came to me because of the thousands of stories that I was hearing from survivors of gender-based violence. And they told me stories ranging from bullying to sexual harassment in the workplace, to rape, sexual assault, sexual extortion, and coercion, and intimate partner violence as well. And it occurred to me that we really weren't just talking about one problem, that we're talking about a number of behaviors under the umbrella of one problem. And if we were going to really get to understand and eliminate any of it, was that we had to consider all of the different behaviors.
You write that gender violence is a systemic issue intersecting with almost all other problems in our society. How does one even begin to address a problem that has become really so entrenched in our culture?
Well, in the book, I describe it as a bit like boiling the ocean. But one way I think that is very helpful to understand it is, again, through the stories that I present in the book and in the stories that have come to me that don't even make it into the book. And that is to break it down into three elements. One is the behavior itself. And I've heard about a whole range of behaviors, and I've already alluded to that. But another thing that people tell me about are the cultural responses to their issues, to the problems that they talk about or that they complain about in their workplace or that they go to the police about in terms of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. And they also then talk about the processes. So there are a combination of things that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at behavior and understanding the behavior. But we also need to be looking at the cultural responses.
You and I were discussing just a little while ago the statistic that American women are more likely to die at the hands of domestic abuse than they are of cancer. And yet we hear proactively people taking, their efforts in order to try to, stop deaths from cancer. But yet we don't hear and see the headlines talking about the deaths resulting from domestic abuse. Why do you think that is?
And that really is due to the cultural response. The cultural response, as well as the processes that you have to go through to get law enforcement's attention to domestic violence, really look very often at the problem as a personal problem, a private problem, a family problem, very often. And we haven't really invested and really question how this is a problem that is not only hurting the individual victims, but it's a problem that is hurting all of us. It hurts families, it hurts communities.
Now, you title your book Believing and present a somewhat optimistic perspective on our path to overcoming gender violence, believing that change as a society is possible. So what gives you this optimism, this sense of hope?
Well, it comes in part from my personal experience of seeing my life change and believing that, having gone through a process of change myself, that the country can actually go through a process of change. I've seen some of it already. I've seen much more activism. I've seen, student activists around sexual assault and on campuses. I've seen a whole number of organizations grown up over the last 30 years that deal with sexual harassment and rape in certain populations like domestic workers or restaurant workers. I've seen women of color and Black feminism emerged to address these issues.
And speaking of change, in a few days, it'll mark 30 years since your testimony at the Clarence Thomas hearings, testimony that at the time was dismissed and ridiculed by some. Do you think that if your experience happened today, that the treatment you received would change in any way?
Well, that's hard to say whether the treatment would change. I can tell you, though, that the process matters. The process for taking in a claim against a powerful political figure, a Supreme Court nominee, as well as the president who has sponsored them, has not changed. But I do think that the public attitude has changed. And that was pretty evident after Christine Blasey Ford's testimony. The public really understood that at the very least, that she needed a fair opportunity to be heard.
And during the election, President Biden apologized for his actions as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee during your testimony. Yet in the book, you write that his apology fell short. What do you believe that the president and those in power need to do to truly commit to ending gender violence? And perhaps also, just to piggyback off the last answer, to change the process?
Well, one thing is, that to me is a very easy answer in terms of the process of the Senate Judiciary Committee. But I think what was missing from President Biden's apology was the acknowledgement of the real harm. I mean, we just talked about the harm from intimate partner violence. We haven't even begun to talk about the problem of the harm that's caused by rape and sexual assault, and the failed processes for those two behaviors. We haven't begun to talk about bullying and harassment and assault in schools that happen to children because of their gender or gender identity or the way they present themselves in terms of their sex and gender. We have only began to acknowledge the process, not only the process, but the behavior itself, the breadth of the behavior, and the harm that it is causing. So
interesting to hear your perspectives and insight. Professor Anita Hill, we thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.